So when you were freelancing in Philadelphia, do you remember what kind of jobs you were taking or what you were doing? Or were you playing weddings or along with clubs and going out on tour? Or what was your life like when you're
I
doing
remember Tony Williams saying, he said, man, you liable to see Tyrone playing anywhere, at a funeral, you know? And, but yeah, I used to do all types of jobs, and I was proud to have that reputation that I was broad-minded enough to play all types of music. And I used to get called. And I remember Larry McKenna saying that during the interview. Somebody interviewed him and asked him about me, and he said that I was the type that could play all type of jobs. And I was really proud of that because a straight-ahead jazz guy wouldn't have gotten that job with Lou Rawls, for example. You know, his hardcore blues, and then he went into the pop stuff. And I have a really interesting story about that. I was playing the Academy of Music with Lou Rawls, and we were opposite the Duke Ellington Orchestra and the Dave Brubeck Quartet. So we went on first. We went on first, and I'm thinking, or was it last? I think it was last, I'm not sure. And so after my set with Lou Rawls, he said, Mr. Bassman, I'd like to see you in the dressing room. I said, something is wrong. This guy never referred to me as Bassman. You know, he knew my first name. So I go in the dressing room. He said, what in the hell were you doing out there? He said, you know, you have to play these charts the way they're written. And, you know, the way you always do. What's going on? So I said, man, but with the influence of Duke Ellington and the Dave Brubeck Quartet, I said, I just wanted to throw a little jazz in there. So that's why I was ad-libbing. He said, well, from now on, there is no more adding and there's no more libbing. So I just, that really made it clear to me that in each genre, you have to stick to the characteristics of that genre and not overlap. And so that's how I developed a reputation of being able to play with singers and stick to that concept, play with hardcore jazz, stick to that concept, play with avant-garde, stick to that concept, et cetera. Yeah, so that's how that came about, that I played all these different bands and different people. And it was a blessing to me because I was kind of proud of myself because I did go through a period of being rather narrow-minded.
I think all jazz players do.
Uh-huh.
Or that's what you want to play, and, you know.
Yeah.
When did you first meet Max Roach? How did that whole collaboration come to fruition?
Well, I was recommended to audition for Max. Calvin Hill had been his bassist for quite some time. In fact, he had quite a few bassists over the years. Reggie Workman, Art Davis, quite a few really good bass players. But I heard that he had lost touch with Calvin Hill, or wasn't able to get in touch with him when a job came up. So he needed a replacement right away. So I got the call, and I went up and auditioned, and I remember being, I don't recall being nervous, but I remembered I used to walk around with Max Roach records trying to think of myself as being cool because I'm listening to these famous jazz guys, and here, a pioneer. And I remember telling him that too when I got the job. I said, man, you know, I said, this is quite an honor. And he was very humble. He said, well, man, I'm standing on a lot of shoulders, so I can't take all of the credit. And he ran off a list of guys that he had listened to. Buddy Rich, Elvin Jones, and it was quite a Big Kid Catlett, I can't think of the name. And there was a bunch of guys, and I thought, man, this is really interesting, you know, that he remained that humble, and he was the one that actually helped them along. I mean, well, pretty much not influenced them, but they were people who admired him, and he, of course, admired them back. But I got away from the question that you asked, which was,
how did you meet?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I went up to audition for him, and we got into the, I think it was the second tune we practiced, and he put the drumsticks down, and he said, let's talk business. And I said, does that mean I'm hired? And he said, well, I have a tour coming up. We're going to do 13 countries in 27 days. And he said, you have to get your passport together, because I'd never been out of the country. And I hurry up and went and got my passport. And it was Odine who recommended me to him.
Oh.
And but it was sort of a weird situation, because he said that he had had a lot of nightmare experiences touring with the acoustic bass.
Oh.
And he asked if I would go on the road with him to play the electric bass. So I'm thinking, all these years I've been listening to these jazz artists, and especially him, who was hardcore acoustic minded. And I said, man, this guy wanted an electric bass? So I said, well, sure, I'll take the job. I couldn't imagine turning down the job with Max. I don't care if he asked me to play the kazoo, you know. Bass lines on the kazoo. So I took the job. And
How old were you?
I would have to go back to my figures, you know. I was in my 20s when I started, and this was some years along the
So
lines.
like late 30s, you say?
Yeah, it had to be somewhere around there, because I ended up staying with him for 19 years.
Yeah.
And I think Cecil had been with him from over 20, something like that. I think Hope had been with him for over 20 or something like that as well. And but it was a wonderful experience working with him. But one of the things I was pointing out was how humble he remained. And I remember one day we rehearsed, and he had a T-shirt on with a picture of Art Blakey on it. And I'm saying, man, these guys, because I heard a lot of reputation. I mean, there was a lot of guys that had reputations for being egotistical and having in-fights with their own people that play their own instruments and in general. But there, among those drummers during that time, there was a lot of camaraderie, just beautiful spirit. Because I had played with Philly Joe a few times, and I recall arriving to a job once, and he motioned to me to come to his table. This is Philly Joe. He said, man, let me shake your hand. I heard you're with the master. And I'm thinking, boy, do people think of you in the same way? And yet he has this feeling of admiration for other drummers, and including Max. And I was very impressed with that, because, of course, I've run into a lot of people who are egotistical and could care less about the other instruments who play other artists who play their instruments. But I remember that. I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, I remember hearing Max Roach. He gave a keynote speech at a Jazz Times convention. Jim and I had gone up there to do something with Dreambox, and he was the keynote speaker. I really was astounded by the breadth of his intelligence and his empathy and his philosophy about playing and life, and it was terrific. Now, what would you say you learned from that 19-year experience with Max?
Well, I don't recall Max ever sitting me down and really sharing any of that sage knowledge of his just directly, but it did rub off on me, you know, like his philosophy about things. For one thing, I remember he always emphasized that classical musicians preserved the classical artists and the composers by continuing to play their music that was hundreds of years old. And he felt that a lot of jazz artists would not do that. They would just play what's current and not really make an effort to keep the other artists alive, like Duke, Coltrane, and Monk. So every set, he made a point to include a composition by one of the older jazz artists, or I should say the pioneering jazz artists, always. So I learned that, and I actually incorporated that too. because even on some of my recordings or when I did, especially when I did live performances, I would always include something by one of the pioneer jazz artists. So I learned that from Max and really learned to appreciate that concept. And he was extremely social conscious too. You know, if you know some of his titles of his recordings are like "Freedom Now, Sweet,"
Him and Abby Lincoln.
and him and Abby Lincoln, yeah, things like that. And I learned that from him as well, to stay conscious of the struggle that we have, and keeping your standards high too, because you couldn't half step it away with him. You had to be at your very best, at the top of your game at all times. And because I remember he said that he learned from Bird, he said that Bird, Charlie Parker, he said when he would play with Parker, he said Parker would start off the night with 3 extremely fast songs, and then he would say, well, now it's time for Slow Boat to China. He would just calm down. So he said that was Bird's, well, I'm sure you heard that Coltrane would practice night and day, and he would, while waiting for dinner or something, he would be practicing in the bathroom while dinner is being prepared for him and so forth. But unlike Train, they said Bird would practice on the bandstand. He would play these fast, extremely fast tempos, and would play extremely challenging songs. And then when he feels that he's developed something and he's learned something new, then he'll just, what Max described as slow go to China. He'll just slow things down and play some normal tempos and some normal tunes. So I learned that from him too, that you have to keep your standards high, very high, because at any night, any time, he'll call something. And he would ask me, he said, you know such and such? I said, yeah. And he said, you know such and such? I said, I'm not sure about that tune. He said, well, learn it. The next day, he called a tune that I didn't know, but based on what he had said, I said, I heard him mention this tune before, I better learn that. And he went to the mic, he said, now, ladies and gentlemen, we like to feature Tyrone Brown on such and such a tune. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, he want me to play the melody to a tune that he just mentioned 2 days ago that I didn't know. But because he had said that, I learned that particular tune. And I remember one of them was, as far I can't think of the title, but it's something that Louis Armstrong had a hit on. And the average jazz guy during that era wouldn't have played that. But because, again, he had suggested that, I learned that tune. And I was featured on it, and he made me play the melody and solo on it.
Now you
I'm sorry, Ain't Misbehaving.
Oh, Anderson,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's Wallace.
Now, you know, Sonny Rollins, Train, those guys wouldn't have played that tune, you know. But Max was challenging me, you know, took me to school.
Now I know you've played a bit with Grover Washington.
I was director, still directing at the Model Cities when I got that call. And his brother used to come through there, and I think he took a few lessons with.
Darryl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Darryl took a few lessons with Sherman Ferguson, and we ended up playing together. So he recommended me to Grover. And Grover asked me if I would like to just go on the road with him, do a couple of jobs just on the weekend. And Darryl had recommended me. And I said, sure, I'd love to play with you. But I had with the exception of Catalyst, I hadn't had the experience of playing on the other side, so to speak, you know, playing crossover music. I was a straight-ahead jazz guy, and of course, and I was developing this reputation and ability to play with different styles of music. So I went on the road with Grover to do that. And I remember after the first job, we all had, it was a huge place, we all had separate dressing rooms. And a reporter came in, he was taking notes. He said, Mr. Brown, I understand you're going to be Grover's regular bassist. I said, you do understand that? I don't understand. I said, he never approached me about that. He said, well, he just told me that. And I said, well, wow, man, I got the job with Grover Washington Jr. And I was informed of it by a reporter, you know. And so I went to Grover's room and I said, yeah, do you want me to stay with the band? He said, absolutely.
Wow. So how long were you with Grover?
Doc Gibbs, the percussionist,
Oh, yeah.
is great with dates. And every time I see him, I ask him about a date or something we did with Grover. He remember the date, the job, and all of that. So, so I don't remember the actual time period.
Doc's still out in California, isn't he?
Yeah, but he still comes back to do jobs here. In fact, the last
I just see him
email.
on Facebook back and forth, you know. and-
Yeah, the last email I got from him, where he said that things were picking up here after he moved to California, and he was even considering coming back. And he's in town now because he's going to be doing that run of jobs with Diane Monroe.
Oh,
He's on that booking too. And I think it's the 17th through the 22nd or the 24th, something like that.
At La Rose? No.
No, this is a place on Germantown Avenue.
Oh, Clyde, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
So that was,
Were you
I
on the-
loved that period with Grover. In fact, I was with Michelle Farrell for a number of years,
Oh, yeah, that's
off and on, and yeah, with Eddie. And I tell everybody, my favorite band leaders were Grover, Max, and Rochelle. And I've been with 100 bands, but they were just truly first-class artists to work with.
Weren't you on the Live at the Bijou album?
Yes.
So do you remember that gig? Or,
Oh, absolutely.
you want to talk about that? I mean, because that was a pretty famous album, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my dad had passed away, and the service was the day before. And I remember they said they were going to be recording that session live, and Creed Taylor was in the audience too, who was the owner of the record company and the record label that we recorded that on. And people were so friendly and warm and comforting and supportive that I remember being in good spirits to do that recording, you know, although I miss my dad, you know. And especially the way he died. He went to Virginia to see some old relatives, and he never returned. He just passed while he was away. But that was a great recording, and my brother was there, and I recall him telling somebody, apparently he had told somebody in the audience that I was his brother. And you know how the general public sometimes think if you're on television, or if you're in a movie, you're a movie star, or if you play with a favorite band, or if you have a little reputation of your own, people didn't believe it because there's something about that psychology, you know. And apparently my brother told somebody I was his brother, and they didn't agree with him. So he was on his second balcony and reached over and he said, Tyrone. I said, hey, Ronald, how are you doing? He said, see? But that happened during the recording of that session too. Mm-hmm. And I remember somebody told me, I think Down told me, he said, Creed really liked me, you know, really liked my playing. Mm-hmm. And that's a great recording.
Yeah.
Great.
Was it just one night, or was it over several nights? Or?
No, I think we played there that entire weekend, maybe.
So it was like they recorded the whole thing and picked and chose? Something?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when Grover went to the recording session, to the mixing session, he selected those particular pieces.
I wanted to ask you about some of the stuff that you've done as a leader with your CDs, especially with the string,
Mm-hmm.
with string quartet that you work with, right? Or string.
We called it the string ensemble
Yeah,
because there were actually 5 strings and
that's
me
with
and a
John
drum.
Blake, right?
Yeah, John was the lead violin soloist because the quartet were strictly classical players, and John was my soloist. But I wrote with them in mind for being for their particular approach and their concept and their backgrounds, and of course I had John there too. And I recall some record reviewers and radio announcers describing us as a chamber jazz. And I said, oh, that's a good title. I never thought of that myself. But basically, that's what it amounted to, because we had this classical sound, but we were playing jazz. And it gave me an opportunity to write, too. I really have a passion for composing. And every time I think that I've drained the well, if I get an appointment or a commission, it's just something else came out of me. And I recall getting a call from Peake, Richard Peake, from the Rare Books collections at Rochester University, from Rochester University. He was in charge of the head books there, and he told me that he would like to do some recordings, and he would like me to put the group together to do it and compose. And he liked my string ensemble. And we ended up doing 3. One was a tribute to Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, we call it A Sky with More Stars. And we did one for John A. Williams, the author. He wrote a lot of really popular books. And another one was for the painter, Herbert Gentry. And Richard Peake at the university told me the reason they wanted to do that is they wanted to preserve the artistic contributions that each of those artists made. And I remember writing all the compositions for those, except for the one with the tribute to Frederick Douglass. I had been doing a lot of concerts with John Blake, and we covered that era, the early days of the 20th century with black artists and pioneers and the people who were fighting in the struggle and so forth. And I said, well, John would be a perfect person to bring on board with this because we shared some of that history going back to that. And so, so he was with the group at the time too. But I also brought him on as a co-composer in addition to being a fine violinist.
So how did you, for the Frederick Douglass thing, because he's one of my personal heroes, how did you construct what you were doing to bring that out, that material?
Well, Richard Peake sent me, in addition to sending me the composition commission and recording commission, he sent me a ton of Frederick Douglass's speeches. Oh. And he thought the idea of, if I researched those speeches, that it would conjure up some of that energy that I needed to reflect in the music. And it absolutely worked, because I read those speeches line by line, line by line, word by word, paragraph by paragraph, and it filled me. I was imbued with this spirit to write with him in mind. And that's how that stuff came about. And once again, since John was already in there, bringing him on as a collaborator really worked.
Go ahead. Ready? Okay, so Tyrone is showing us here January 1999 letter from the Philadelphia Orchestra. You want to explain the circumstances behind that?
Yeah, that was a contract they sent me to be a guest artist with the orchestra. And the performance was to be of the Three Black Kings, composed by Duke and his son, Mercer Ellington. And I, of course, accepted the job. And it was a tremendous boost to my career. And I really felt honored to perform with them.
With the Philadelphia Orchestra?
Yeah,
absolutely. I guess this would have been in the Academy of Music?
It was the Academy, yes.
Yeah, right. Who was conducting, you remember?
Andre, can't think of his last name.
Oh, Raphael Smith?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right, okay, yeah.
You might be able to find something, because he's been working with the...
I'm the archivist for the orchestra.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Really?
I'm their archivist, yeah.
See if there's anything in there.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there is. I could probably find the program.
Oh,
You have
that'd be
it?
wonderful.
Well, you don't have, you probably did and you lost it, right?
Oh, I did have the problem. I lost it. I lost track of
I
it,
could
yes.
probably get you a copy.
Are you serious? Oh, that would be great. I'd love that.
Yeah, so this would have been in January or February of 99?
Yes.
I mean, the letter's January 99, is Martin Luther King Day is,
Yeah, so it was shortly after that,
right, okay.
because they sent me the music and the contract.
So, you know, the Philadelphia Orchestra is renowned.
Oh,
What was it like being on stage with that sound?
It was fantastic. It was truly fantastic. And I remember there was a reputation that most classical artists didn't have the same type of revere or respect for jazz artists that they do among themselves, but everybody was very friendly. In fact, I recall the whole bass section came over to shake my hand after the rehearsal, and they were very friendly, warm people. And like I said, I had taken a few lessons with Michael Sheehan, who was assistant principal bassist, and he came over too.
Was he still in the orchestra?
Yeah, he was still in the orchestra at that time, right.
It must have been quite a thrill, huh?
Oh, it was, yeah. Another side story about that is after hearing Gary Carr, the famed classical artist, I thought it would be nice if I could also play the bow rather than just pizzicato playing jazz. And I remember really working on the bow, and then I did all this research and found that even during that period, and even now, there's still just a handful of African American players in that genre that's in those orchestras, and I remember getting discouraged. That's on me. I should never have stopped that, but I backed off on that bow because I said there's no point in me trying to perfect the bow, and there was no opportunity of me ever getting a position with an orchestra. So just being a guest artist helped to solve some of that for me. I really felt good about that, and being accepted by them as well.